What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we are looking at not only some drafts, but also answering a question that gets asked quite a lot in pre-season: which is the best formation? And to do that, I'm going to go through a bunch of different formations using a base draft and then changing them based on whichever formation we're switching to, so 3-4-3 to 5 at the back or whatever it might be. Talking about the pros and the cons, but also running through the Fantasy Football Scout Rate My Team tool, which I'll show you in just a second. So I have partnered with Fantasy Football Scout for pre-season. If you haven't already checked them out, there is 20% off at the time of recording this, I should say. I'm not quite sure when the video is going to go out yet, but obviously click that link in the description below and it will take you through. You can pay monthly or you can pay a one-off payment for the whole year as well. So I'm going to show you what's available with that. Then we're going to get into the formations, the draft, and we'll see which one comes out the best. So if you haven't already checked out Fantasy Football Scout, make sure you do. There is a link in the description below. Like I said, there are loads of great tools on this. I've basically been using this since I started playing FPL, so I'm about to go into my 11th or 12th season. Huge amount of tools here, right? They're all on the left. You can see them here. I'm not going to go into each individual one because that would just take forever. There's that many, but you've got player stats. Obviously, if you want to check players on an individual level, team stats as well. The comparison tool is great. So, for example, already we're seeing, should I get Rafinha? Can Harrison cover him for 0.5 million less? You use the comparison tool and you can match them up for last season just to see who might come on top. There's custom stats tables. There's public stats tables. So if other people have made really great ones, you can just go and check theirs out and all that good stuff. The one we're using today is Rate My Team. Now, when the season's going, you can just put your team ID in here and it'll pick your whole team, and then you can make changes. You can see how many expected points the transfers you're looking at are maybe going to have. But obviously for pre-season, you can check it on a price level or a position level. So this is for all players. So it's saying for the first for the first 6 weeks, which, by the way, you can change at the top. So if you want to do a shorter span or a longer span, you can. But for the first 6 weeks, it's obviously saying Salah's the best option, then Fernandes, then Mane, then De Bruyne, and it will give you those expected points based on the kind of system that is set up to determine that, which you can read more about on the site. But if you were looking for a forward, for example, for your team, and you wanted to only spend 8 million or 7.5 million, then it would also list who the best options are for the first 6 weeks. So it thinks Antonio's the best, then Watkins, then Welbeck, then Wilson, etc. So if you're not too sure, then you can put a team together or you can go and look on an individual player basis. What we're going to do today is build our teams, which I'll do in a minute when we go through the drafts, and we're going to see which one comes out on top for the first 6 games. So if you want to check it out, link in the description, and let's talk about the first draft. Okay, let's start off with the classic, the 3-4-3 formation. This is most people's go-to formations. In this one, I wouldn't massively get hung up on which players have been chosen. For the most part, I've chosen popular players that also fit in with this formation, right? Obviously, as we change them, we'll be able to, if we go 5 at the back or 4 at the back, you'd have more expensive defenders, etc. But for this one, I've gone for a few 4.5 million defenders. So Fofana, White, and Holding. Now, the reason I've chosen White and Holding is because if White goes to Arsenal, then I'd probably have Lamptey and White. So still covering Brighton and Arsenal, which is why I've chosen those players. Gilmore in as the cheap midfielder. That could be Basuma. It could be Brownhill. It really doesn't matter. It's a 4.5 million midfielder to sit on your bench. Now, for this particular one, I've gone for Salah and Kane. Now, the reason for that is this pretty much leaves you as flexible as possible, because if there's another striker that starts performing well, with Harry Kane, you can literally switch to anybody you want. And also, it's probably worth keeping him in mind, because if he goes to Man City, that's obviously going to be quite big. Most of us are going to want him in our team. So building a draft around how to get him, or at least thinking about that, is probably a good thing. Then you've got Salah in midfield. Obviously, then you can swap to pretty much any other midfielder as well. Same thing with Trent. And again, ignore the captaincy. It's not all set. I'm going to obviously captain Salah in game week 1. The reason this formation is so good is because, yes, there's some very good defenders at the 6 million mark, the 5.5. And I think I almost think it's a trap that people fall into, is they compare players as if they're like for like. So they'll say, you got all these 6.5 and 7 million midfielders. They're not as good as the 6.5 or 7 million defenders, right? And in some cases, without getting into it too much, that is true. But if it's a 7 million pound midfielder with a £4.5 million defender, that combo in most cases is better than the £7 million defender and a £4.5 million midfielder, because most of the players at 4.5 or below in both midfield and midfield and forward, either don't play or they're not going to get you many points. So the great thing about the 3-4-3, you get 2 players on your bench that are going to play. So it's the 4.5 million defenders. Then you get a third player that also plays, your 4.5 million midfielders. Sure, they don't get you too many points, but at least they're going to get you some appearance points if you have to call upon them. Whereas if you had to go for some strikers at 4.5, most of them just don't play, or they're not going to get any minutes. So with this formation, you kind of cut all that extra stuff out. So it kind of is the perfect formation, right? Even if you had a cheaper player up front and like a Fernandes in midfield instead, that absolutely works. But you get some playing players that are excellent value. If you had to have like 2 or 3 4.5 million midfielders and forwards, then it gets a little bit more tricky, because if you have to call on your bench, which everybody does at some point, then they're not going to come on. So I really like the balance of this team. You've got an expensive defender, an expensive midfielder, and an expensive striker, and you fill in the rest of the spots with lots of good value picks. So it's looking good, and I've already put it into the Fantasy Football Scout Rate My Team. So let me bring that up, and this is going to be the basis. We're going to try and beat this score with similar players, but in different formations. So what the tool will do is show you the expected points for those players. And obviously what you can do, if you put your draft in this tool once you've signed up, you can then mix players up. So if you think, right, Jota's getting this score, is there another player at 7.5 million or above, or below, that can outscore him? That's the kind of things you want to be looking at. And I like to use this tool as a reference point. So if I'm making a change in my team or a transfer, I want to see what a tool like this is showing me to see if I'm on the right tracks, right? And obviously you can agree with it, you can disagree, but it's a good basis to kind of make your decision. So for this one, we got 343 points, or 343.59 points for the first 6 game weeks, with a good starting point position, 58 points. Obviously, this is never going to show you like 80, 90, 100 points, because it's balanced out players' points over the whole season, right? Which makes sense. If Salah scores like 250 points or whatever over a season, that's not like 20 points a game week, right? So 343.59 is our base point. Let's see if we can outscore that with a different formation. Okay, so this is a 3-5-2 formation that I've come up with. Now, I've only swapped 3 players to get to this. So Kane has gone to Davis up front, but like I said, there's no 4.5 million forwards that play. So that spot almost becomes like a dead end, like a dead spot. You're never really going to use Davis. You're not going to want to play him. But that's fine, because in this formation, because you've still got 3 at the back, you've still got 2 players on the bench in 4.5 million defenders that are going to play, right? So that's handy. And that money has gone to Fernandes. So I've gone from Gilmore to Fernandes. That also gave me an extra 0.5 million to spend, because remember, Fernandes is actually cheaper than Kane in this. Kane's 12.5, Fernandes is 12, right? Which is quite nice. So Fernandes comes in, it gives me 0.5 to spend. So in this one, I've also upgraded, depending on your definition. Maybe you think it's a downgrade, but I've gone from Harrison to Saka, so it gives us an Arsenal attacker instead. And I know there's caveats about this, like obviously how far England get, will players then be given a break before they start the Premier League season? That's all stuff that we'll figure out closer to the season start. I'm not going to massively worry about that for now. So overall, I really like the 3-5-2. You get an extra midfielder, and if you nail the right ones, they get extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet. There's 2 downsides to this formation versus the 3-4-3. One is the extra player on your bench, but realistically, you're talking about Davis, who's going to get pretty much no points over the season because he won't play, versus a Gilmore or a Basuma that are pretty much going to get next to no points for you as well, and you're never going to play them. So it doesn't make that much difference. The only other one is if you need to get to Harry Kane, you've got to do it in 2 moves, because you've got to shift the money out of midfield, so from Fernandes or Salah, and then shift it to Kane. My thinking along that is, if you're going into Game Week 1 without Kane, that's a decision you've made. Nothing Kane then does should really change your mind. You know he's a great striker. You know he's going to get points whether he's at Spurs or Man City. By Game Week 1, you've looked at him as a player, you've looked at the team he's in, you've looked at the fixtures, you've made that decision. So the fact that you could have to go to him in 2 moves would not stop me doing this, right? So I quite like the 3-5-2. I've run it through the Rate My Team tool again. So it was 3-4-3-59 for the 3-4-3 formation. For this formation, the 3-5-2, it's come out at 3-4-5 4.43, so slightly higher. I do know that I had Basuma in here instead of Gilmore in the first one I did for the 3-4-3. It literally made next to no difference, so don't panic too much about that. So it actually prefers this formation, probably because Fernandes comes out so well, because Man United fixtures are quite good. So this wouldn't necessarily say to me, right, I have to go 3-5-2, but it tells me it's definitely an option and there are potential for more points. And it might seem like hardly anything, a couple of points here or there, but over a season that really starts to add up, and especially with the fixtures that Fernandes have got. So 3 at the back is looking quite good, whether it's a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2. Let's look at some of the other formations. Okay, so let's talk about 4 at the back in general, because this could be 4-5-1, it could be 4-3-3, it could be 4-4-2. So there's plenty of ways you can play this. The reason I've started off with a 4-3-3, and this is what I'm going to put into the Rate My Team tool as well, is because I think it probably is the best 4 at the back formation, because you still get 3 playing players on the bench, albeit 2 of them are midfielders, which is just not that great. Generally, the 4.5 million defenders are better value than the same price midfielders, but you can get something like Gilmore, I was going to say Bilmore then, Gilmore, Basuma and White, and then you've still got your 2 premium midfielders in Salah and Fernandes. I've opted for Rafinha to be my cheaper one, and then you've got the 3 players up front, and I think that 7.5 to 8 million bracket is going to be quite valuable. And then at the back, obviously you go for a bit more of an expensive backline, right? So instead of like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Shaw and then a bunch of 4.5s, you add in Stones, you add in Luka Dean as well. There aren't too many problems with this formation, I said. You're still fairly flexible. Ultimately, if you go 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, you're still going to have a cheaper player in midfield anyway, like a Saka like I had before, or a Harrison, that aren't actually that much more than kind of Shaw, Stones and Luka Dean, who are all 5.5. So that aspect isn't too bad. You've still got your capsy options in Salah and Fernandes. Obviously, if you wanted Kane instead, you'd make that change. You'd switch Fernandes to Kane, and you'd switch one of the forward line down to like a Saka or a Harrison or whoever it might be for 7 million, like a Maddison or someone like that. So I don't actually mind this formation at all. Again, it's those 2 transfers that you'd have to use to go from, Luka Dean or Stones or whoever it is to a midfielder instead, and you'd have to fund that a bit as well. That might be a slight issue because you can't go from Stones plus Gilmore to a 6 million or a 6.5 million midfielder plus a 4.5 million defender. So it maybe leaves you a bit inflexible. But what it does do, especially at the start of the season, is it provides quite a lot of value. Right, there's value in those kind of defenders that play for big teams that are either defensively sound or have got attacking potential. Right, so Trent, clean sheet, attacking potential. Luka Dean, we'll have to see how Everton do this year, but I think they could improve defensively, and he is very attacking. Shaw's extremely attacking, plays in a pretty defensive side, and obviously Stones, not necessarily renowned for massive amount of headed chances from corners, set pieces, etc., but he plays for a very good defensive side, right? So the defence looks good, the midfield looks good, and the forward line looks good. Once you start changing it up to 4-4-2, then straight away you're adding in a forward that's not really going to play, like a Davis. Now, obviously, you can spend more on that spot, but once you start putting more money on your bench, you're taking out of your 11. I just don't like playing like that at the start. And obviously, the other one's 4-5-1, but then you've got to have 2 forwards that are 4.5. That's basically 2 players playing on your bench that just are no good. So I think if you're going to go 4 at the back, 4-3-3 is probably the best, or 4-4-2. I just think 4-5-1 is just too inflexible, and having those 2 players that are just going to get you no minutes, no points, is just not a good thing. So 4-3-3, I'll be honest, it's actually looking pretty good. You put this in the Rate My Team tool, and it's on 348.14. So that is higher than the 352, which was 345, and higher than the 343 that was 343 points. So it's actually looking quite good. It really likes Trent Alexander-Arnold. Obviously, Luka Dean's got really good fixtures. Shaw, good fixtures, attacking, and Stones plays for one of the best defences in the league. Obviously, you could yourself, once you're in this tool, go back to the 3-4-3, the 3-5-2, etc., and change some players around to get a higher score, just to see if you're missing anything. But on the basis of this, where I'm trying to keep the teams fairly similar as we go through, the 4 at the back maybe isn't that bad, at least if you play it in a 4-3-3. Okay, so now we're going to big at the back. 5 at the back formations, right? So it could be 5-3-2, it could be 5-2-3, it could be 5-4-1, right? There's loads of ways to go. I've chosen 5-3-2 because it at least leaves you a little bit flexible, because if you go 5-2-3, right? That might look good because you've got 3 decent forwards. But if a cheaper midfielder emerges, it's hard to then get to them. At least with Rafinha, you've got that spot there. You could try and get up to like a Jota instead. So you've got 7.5 million to cover any midfielder that you want to change to. There's lots of different ways. Obviously, that way, you'd have to take out one of the Liverpool defenders. And again, in isolation, just thinking about it as a formation week to week, I don't mind it hugely. All those defenders are probably going to be good value at some point throughout the season, and there's no reason why that can't be from game week 1. A lot of them have got good fixtures, or they play for very, very good defensive teams anyway. You've still got your 2 big hitting midfielders, Salah, Fernandes. Again, you could switch this money around to get Kane, the cheaper midfielder, etc. I do think there's issues with the bench, right? There's just no comparison between a 4.5 million defender and a 4.5 million midfielder or forward. So the bench is an issue. As soon as one of your players misses out that's in the main team, then there's issues off the bench. The funny thing is, and that is why I wouldn't go 5-4-1 or anything like that. I think it just gets even worse. The funny thing is, Rate My Team quite likes it. 347.5. Okay, so from obviously this is based on the best points from your first 11 that you're going to play every single week. Yes, there's issues if players have to come off the bench, but as first 11s go, it's pretty decent. So it does give you something to think about. I think 4 at the back is probably the maximum that I would go for. I do think 5 at the back can work at times. And if you have to play it, then fair enough. But I would never want to start my season on it. I just think there's too many cons. It leaves you way too inflexible. The players on the bench aren't good enough. There's a reason 3-4-3 is so good, because if you do need players off your bench, they're there, right? You've got those 4.5 million defenders. But as Rate My Team is showing, from a first 11 perspective, bearing in mind, especially at the start of the season, you don't tend to see necessarily as much rotation. Obviously, players aren't yet injured. We know who's going to be fit for the start of the season for the most part. It might not be the worst thing to go for something like this until you wildcard. The scores are good. You just have to ask yourself whether they're good enough for you to risk those kind of formations. And like I said, you can go and pick and choose different players for, you know, all the other formations you might be thinking about to see who's a better option. So for this, for example, I've got Stones in there at 5.5 and Luka Dean in there at 5.5. I could come off this screen and then go back to basically the players screen instead. And from there, I can go max price, 5.5, position defender, and then it's got Luka Dean, Stones, and Shaw are the best options. So unless you've got another spot to spend that money on, there aren't any other better options you can go for anyway. So you assume that is the best, and then you go back to the midfielders and maybe you try the same thing. It's just a great way to give you some different perspective, right? It gives you another opinion, essentially. So that is big at the back. Let me know what you think about that. A lot of people talk about this formation, but it's much harder to go through once you get to game week 1. So there we go. That is it for this one. Please do give it a like if you've enjoyed it and hit that subscribe button. Of course, go to the comment section right now. Let me know which is your favorite formation. We all know the 3-4-3 is the gold standard. It's the one everyone goes towards. But is there something to be said for 4 at the back, 3-5-2, or 5 at the back instead? You do tend to get a lot of great value players around the 5 to 7 million mark in defence. Is that enough to make you switch? Obviously, if you want to sign up to Fantasy Football Scout, there isn't just the Rate My Team tool. There's loads of other stuff there as well. There's a link in the description below if you want to check that out. I will be back again soon for another FPL video. Like I said, I'm not quite sure when this is going out. I'm recording this on Monday before England have even played their semi-final. So by the time you see this, the Euros might be over. I'll decide whether to put it in between the semis and the final or just wait until Euro 2020 is over. But either way, even if some players get injured, they're not going to be back, etc., you can just go and change them in your own drafts, change them on the Rate My Team tool and all that good stuff. I'll catch you again soon. Thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit like. See you soon.